Police target a pastor. Seconds later, karma strikes back. It started like any other morning. The sun had just begun to rise over the rooftops of Oak Grove, casting a soft orange glow on the sidewalks. Most of the neighborhood was still waking. Up, kids getting ready for school, shop owners unlocking their doors, and elders sipping tea on their porches. But within minutes, a peaceful morning would turn into something unforgettable. What happened in those few seconds would shake an entire city. Officer Stone had been patrolling these streets for years. He knew every crack in the pavement, every alley, every face. Or at least he thought he did. He wasn't in a great mood that morning. The heat was already creeping in, and the radio had been full of small incidents all night. His grip on the steering wheel was tight as he turned the corner and spotted a group of young men standing near the corner store. They weren't doing anything wrong, just talking, laughing. But something about the scene made him frown. Maybe it was old habits. Maybe it was bias he hadn't admitted yet. Either way, he slowed the car and watched them for a moment. That's when he saw someone familiar in the middle of the group. A tall man in a gray button-up shirt, speaking gently, his hands moving slowly as he talked. It was the pastor. Everyone in the neighborhood knew him. He wasn't just a preacher on Sundays. He showed up for birthdays, hospital visits, and late-night phone calls. He walked these streets every morning, checking in on people, offering help, or just listening. But in that moment, all Officer Stone saw was a crowd. He pulled up sharply to the curb. His car door swung open. The group turned as he stepped out, lights flashing behind him. "Break it up," he barked, his voice sharp and heavy. "Now?" The young men went quiet, shifting nervously. But the pastor didn't flinch. He turned calmly, hands by his sides, and gave a polite nod. "Good morning, officer," he said. "We're just talking." "Talking?" Officer Stone's voice rose. "This looks like loitering to me. Maybe worse." The pastor took a step forward, still calm. "These young men are discussing a plan to help the community center. After-school programs, job training ideas, that sort of thing." But Stone didn't want to hear it. His eyes scanned the faces, already making assumptions, connecting dots that didn't exist. "Save it," he snapped. "I've seen what happens when groups like this hang around too long." One of the boys shifted uncomfortably, and Stone's hand hovered near his belt. The tension grew thick. Phones appeared. Someone started recording. The pastor raised a eye, hand gently, not in fear, but to keep the peace. "Officer," he said, "I've known these young men since they were little. They're trying to make something better of themselves. Maybe if you listened—" "Don't lecture me," Stone interrupted, stepping closer. "You think just because you wear a collar, you can talk down to me?" "I think we both serve the community," the pastor replied quietly. "And today, it needs calm more than control." Stone's jaw clenched. Something inside him, anger, ego, fear, took over. And in one quick move, his hand shot out. The slap echoed down the street. The pastor's head snapped to the side. A red mark bloomed across his cheek. For a moment, time stood still. Gasps filled the air. Someone screamed. Phones were lifted higher. People poured out from nearby shops. The young men stood frozen, eyes wide. But the pastor, he didn't shout. He didn't step back. He turned his face back slowly and met the officer's eyes. There was no hatred in his look, no rage, only sadness, maybe even pity. That look hit Officer Stone harder than the slap ever could. He took a step back, heart pounding. The weight of dozens of eyes fell on him, and for the first time in years, he saw them not as threats, but as people. Real people. Hurt, shocked, disappointed. He turned without a word and walked back to his car. The crowd didn't follow. They just watched as he drove away. In the rearview mirror, the officer caught one last glance of the pastor, standing tall, surrounded by people who cared about him, people he had protected in ways that couldn't be measured in reports or arrests. Slap had taken only a second. But its impact was just beginning. What came next would change everything. The video hit social media within the hour. By lunchtime, it was everywhere. At first, it was just shared in local neighborhood groups. Then it started popping up on timelines. Across the city. Then, across the state. The title was short, but impossible to ignore. Pastor slapped by cop during peaceful talk. No one could believe it. People watched it again and again. The same moment over and over. The raised hand, the stunned silence, the calm look on the pastor's face. It wasn't just the slap. It was the dignity in how the pastor stood afterward, bruised but not broken, and the way the officer turned and walked away. No apology, no words, just silence. By mid-afternoon, a quiet tension had spread across Oak Grove. In homes, barbershops, grocery stores, people were talking. Some were angry, some were heartbroken, but all of them were watching. Back on the same corner where the incident happened, a small group began to gather. Young people mostly. Some had been there that morning. Others had only seen it online. One of them stood with a handmade sign that simply read, "Protect our leaders." It wasn't a protest, at least not yet. More like a vigil. A moment to stand together in something they didn't yet have words for. Across the street, the pastor sat on a wooden bench outside the community center. His cheek still carried the mark from earlier, but his expression was calm. Someone had offered ice. He politely declined. "I'll heal," he said. "Let's focus on what comes next." A young woman from the neighborhood approached, her eyes full of emotion. "You need to press charges, Pastor. You can't let this slide." He gave a quiet smile, shaking his head. Pressing charges is one thing, but what changes will that bring tomorrow? "So we just do nothing?" she asked, frustrated. "Not nothing," he replied. "We just do it the right way." At the police station, Officer Stone sat at his desk. The silence was louder than anything he'd heard in years. Conversations stopped when he walked into rooms. Eyes didn't meet his. Even the coffee pot felt colder somehow. He tried to act like it didn't bother him, like it was just another overreaction, just people jumping on the internet bandwagon. But deep down, something wasn't sitting right. He'd been an officer for almost 2 decades. He'd handled fights, weapons, high-speed chases. But this was different. He hadn't expected to be watched. Not like that. Not filmed. Not posted. Not turned into a symbol. He hadn't expected that look, the one the pastor gave him after the slap. He thought he knew what guilt felt like, but that look brought something deeper, a discomfort that didn't go away. That evening, he drove home in silence. The radio stayed off. His thoughts ran louder than any song could have. When he walked through the front door, his wife looked up from the living room, her eyes red. On the TV, the video was playing again. A news anchor was talking, but he didn't hear a word. "You did this?" she asked softly, pointing to the screen. "Tell me it's not real." His voice caught. "It's not what it looks like." She didn't yell. She didn't argue. That almost made it worse. "You hit a pastor," she said after a long pause, "in front of a crowd, in front of kids, in front of people who trusted you." He tried to explain about the tension, the split-second decision, the years of pressure on the job. But the words felt weak, flimsy, and for once, he didn't even believe himself. Upstairs, he heard the bedroom door shut. His kids wouldn't come down to see him. The video was still playing on TV. He turned it off. Back at the community center, something else was happening. A meeting had been called, impromptu, but full. Neighbors packed into folding chairs. Young, Old, families, business owners. Some were silent, some were furious, some just wanted to know what to do next. The pastor stood at the front, still calm, though tired. He looked at the faces he'd known for decades, the faces of people who had called him in moments of crisis, people whose babies he'd baptized, whose grandparents he'd buried, people he'd fed, listened to, prayed with. He cleared his throat. "My friends," he began, "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be." A murmur moved through the room. "But I need you to understand something. This is not just about me. This is about all of us, about the patterns we live in and the ones we have the power to break." A man stood up. "So what do we do, Pastor? Just let him walk away?" "No," the pastor said simply. "But we don't meet fire with fire either. We meet it with clarity, with unity and with strength." Another voice called out, "We need to be heard." "And we will be," the pastor nodded. "Not with rage, but with truth. Let's show them who we really are." Plans began to form. Peaceful protests, media outreach, conversations with city leaders, but not revenge, accountability. The kind that lasts, the kind that leads to change. As the meeting closed, one woman hugged the pastor gently. "We stand with you," she said. He nodded. "And I'll stand with you. Not just now, but through whatever comes next." And deep in his heart, the pastor knew this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The next morning, the pastor stood in front of his bathroom mirror, holding a warm cloth gently to his cheek. The red mark had darkened overnight. It didn't sting anymore, but it still throbbed. Not just on the skin, but deep inside. The kind of pain that doesn't come from a hand, but from being misunderstood, humiliated, and disrespected in front of the very people you've given your life to serve. He sighed and let the cloth fall into the sink. Across the house, the phone kept ringing. Church members, reporters, strangers. He didn't answer. Not yet. Downstairs, he poured himself a cup of tea. The house was quiet, but his mind wasn't. He replayed the moment in his head. Not the slap, but what came right before it. The officer's face, the anger, the fear, the way his hand had moved without thought like a reflex. The sound it made, and the silence that followed. The silence hurt more than the strike. By mid-morning, a local reporter stood outside the church. A young woman, nervous but respectful. She didn't demand an interview. She asked for a conversation. And for some reason, the pastor said yes. They sat on a bench just beyond the chapel doors. The camera was small, her questions quiet. "Pastor," she asked softly, "why didn't you retaliate?" He smiled gently. "Because violence is loud, but dignity echoes longer." She nodded, looking unsure. "Do you think the officer should be fired?" The pastor looked at the sky for a moment before answering. "I think he should face the consequences of his actions," he said carefully. "But I also think punishment alone doesn't heal anything. Real justice doesn't stop at punishment. It invites change." "Some people say you're being too forgiving," the reporter added. "Too soft." He let out a breath. "I understand that," he said. "And I don't blame them. People are tired of turning the other cheek. But forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the hardest thing we ever do." That short clip aired that night. And once again, the city reacted. Some people praised him. Others were angry, even hurt. "He's letting that officer off the hook," one man said in a barber shop. "We need more leaders like him," said a woman at a corner store. "He's stuck in old ways," said a younger activist. "That kind of thinking hasn't gotten us anywhere." Within hours, the church inbox was flooded. Messages of love, of support, of gratitude, but also messages of disagreement. People wanted to know what would happen next, what he would do. He wasn't sure yet. That night, he hosted a small discussion at the church. Chairs arranged in a circle, no microphones, no cameras. Just people, mostly regulars, a few new faces. Everyone holding their feelings close to the surface. One woman, her voice shaking, said, "Pastor, I love you. But I think you're wrong this time." He looked at her kindly. "Tell me why," he said. "Because this was you," she said. "Not just another person. You, the heart of this neighborhood. If someone can do that to you in public, what's to stop them from doing worse to someone else?" A few heads nodded. Another man chimed in, younger, passionate. "We've been told to be patient for too long. Forgive, wait, hope. We've done all that. Where's the change?" The pastor leaned forward in his chair. "You're right," he said simply. "We have waited, and we're still waiting. But here's my truth. I don't forgive because I want to let someone off the hook. I forgive because I want to live free." "Free from what?" the young man asked. "Free from hate," the pastor said. "From carrying the same anger that broke that officer in the first place." Silence. Then someone else spoke. "But what do we do now?" The pastor paused. "We do two things," he said. "First, we make sure the truth is told, loud and clear. And second, we build something better from it." Later that week, a group of younger residents formed their own coalition, determined to take a firmer stance. They called for town hall meetings, pushed for body cam accountability, and posted the officers' prior complaints online. Their tone wasn't cruel, but it was sharp. The pastor supported their energy, but reminded them to lead with purpose, not just reaction. "We're all on the same road," he said, "but we're walking at different speeds." Meanwhile, outside the spotlight, something quieter was happening. A man named Lionel, who hadn't been to church in 15 years, showed up at the pastor's door with 2 bags of groceries and a letter. "I don't talk much," he said, "but I saw what happened. You held your head high. I want my kids to learn that kind of strength." Inside the envelope was a simple note. "This neighborhood stands taller because of you. We're with you, no matter what." The pastor read the letter 3 times before setting it beside his Bible. Later that evening, alone in the chapel, he knelt down at the front pew. The bruise on his cheek had faded a little, but the burden still sat heavy on his chest. He prayed not for vengeance, not for justice in the legal sense. He prayed for clarity, for his community, for the officer, for the brokenness in all of them, the parts they hide, the parts that lash out, the parts that still hope. Outside the church, a group of youth walked past, slowing for a moment. One of them looked at the open door and nodded. "He's still here," he whispered. And that was something, not a solution, but a start. The morning after the video went viral, Officer Stone sat in his car for nearly 30 minutes before walking into the station. The building he once walked through with confidence now felt unfamiliar, unwelcoming. He kept his head down as he passed through the halls. No one spoke to him. A few glanced his way, then quickly turned back. Even the rookie officers, the ones who used to greet him with nervous respect, suddenly had somewhere else to be. He didn't blame them. Deep down, he didn't know what he would have done if he saw that video from the outside either. Inside the locker room, he sat on a bench, staring at his badge. It used to mean something: responsibility, service, honor. But now it just felt heavy. The captain called him into the office that afternoon. The moment he stepped inside, he saw the video frozen on the screen. Paused at the exact second his hand struck the pastor. "Tell me," the captain said, voice low but sharp. "What were you thinking?" Officer Stone didn't have a real answer. It happened fast. Too fast for you to remember he was a respected community leader? Too fast to remember people have phones? Too fast to remember basic human decency? He didn't respond. "You're on leave," the captain continued. Effective immediately. Internal Affairs will be in touch. Go home. He stood slowly and left the room, his body moving before his mind could catch up. At his locker, he took off the uniform, each piece, feeling heavier than the last. By the time he got to the badge, his hands were trembling. That night at home was worse. His wife didn't say much. The kids barely spoke to him. His youngest had drawn a picture in school, a police officer and a man shaking hands. The teacher had asked her about it. The girl had just shrugged and said, "I wish this was real." That night, he sat in the living room long after everyone had gone to bed, the only light coming from the TV screen. The same clip played on loop. Different. News outlets, same moment, same slap, same silence. He tried to turn it off, but his hand just hovered over the remote. Then came a knock on the door. It was just past midnight. No one was outside. But on the porch step sat a small white envelope, neatly folded, with his name written on the front. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, steady and clear. Officer Stone, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. 3 years ago, you stopped my son. He was 16. Walking home from school. You said he fit the description. He was carrying a trumpet case. You made him sit on the curb for 2 hours while I searched for him. You said it was procedure. That night, he cried himself to sleep. Not because he was scared, but because he thought he had done everything right and it still wasn't enough. Watching that video yesterday brought it all back. And I realized something. You've been carrying something inside you that's poisoned every street you've walked on. Maybe you were taught to fear. Maybe you were taught to control. But you weren't taught to listen. I don't write this out of anger. I write this because I hope, maybe now, you'll listen. My son is studying criminal justice now. He still believes in the badge. I pray you learn to believe in it too. The right way. There was no name signed. He read it again. And again. By the fourth reading, something cracked. Not loudly. Not like a breakdown in the movies. No shouting. No tears. Just a deep, aching silence. He set the letter down, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and felt the weight of every decision he'd made pressing down on him at once. Memories returned, small ones. Stops he barely remembered. Raised voices, cold stares, shuffled excuses. Kids he spoke to like criminals. Mothers he ignored. People he dismissed with a look, a tone, a shrug. He hadn't thought much of it then, but it added up. All of it. And, for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like the one in control. He felt lost. Later that day, his wife walked into the kitchen to find him sitting at the table, staring at a notepad. He had written a single sentence at the top. "Where did I start to go wrong?" She said nothing, but she sat down beside him. For the first time in days, they were silent together, not apart. "I think I need help," he said finally. Real help. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. "I know," she said, "and I'm glad you finally see it." A few hours later, the phone rang. It was the precinct, but it wasn't Internal Affairs. It was the captain's assistant. "Officer Stone," she said, "Pastor Wright has requested a private meeting with you. Just the two of you. No cameras, no press, just a conversation." He paused, stunned. "He wants to talk?" "Yes. He said it's your decision. He sat quietly for a moment. "Tell him." His voice shook. "Tell him I'm not ready, but I want to be." And for the first time in a long time, he felt something that surprised him. Not shame, not anger, not fear, hope, small, fragile, but real, the kind that can grow if you let it. 2 days had passed since the video shook the city. Outside, the streets felt different. Not louder, not yet, but heavier, like people were walking under a sky that could crack open at any moment. At home, Officer Stone kept to himself. He hadn't turned on the TV since reading that letter. He hadn't worn his badge, his uniform, or his usual walls of justification. He was just there, floating in the quiet, uncomfortable, uncertain. Then the phone rang again. It was the precinct, but this time it wasn't the captain. Stone? The voice was calm, familiar. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was Lieutenant Hayes. She paused before continuing, her tone softer than usual. I just got off the phone with Pastor Wright. Stone's stomach tightened. He's not pressing charges, she added. He's not making demands, but he's asked to meet with you. In person, somewhere neutral. Stone stayed quiet. He said to tell you this. We can't heal what we don't face, and we can't face what we refuse to see. A long silence. Finally, Stone exhaled. Where? The community center. Tomorrow morning. Just you and him. No press, no cameras, just 2 people. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say it was too soon. He wanted to say it wouldn't make a difference. But something inside him, that fragile thing he was still trying to name, said, go. The next morning, Stone parked his personal car a few blocks from the community center. No uniform, just a plain button-up shirt, jeans, and the weight of everything he'd been carrying. He stood outside the door for a full minute before walking in. The building was quiet. Usually it buzzed with kids and volunteers, church groups, meetings. But today, it had been cleared for one reason. Pastor Wright sat at a table in the middle of the main room, 2 chairs, 2 cups of coffee, and years of tension between them. He looked up and gave a small nod. Thank you for coming. Stone sat, down slowly, avoiding eye contact at first. I didn't know if I would. I wasn't sure if you should, the pastor said gently. But I'm glad you did. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Heavy with everything unspoken. Pastor Wright broke it first. I'm not here to accuse you, he said. I think the whole city has already done that. Stone let out a breath through his nose. Yeah. I'm here to ask you something, the pastor continued. Something simple but not easy. Stone looked up. Why? The question landed like a stone. I don't mean the slap, Wright added quickly. I mean the anger, the fear, the way you looked at those boys, the way you looked at me. What were you really seeing? Stone's throat tightened. He opened his mouth. But nothing came. The pastor waited. Finally, the words came, raw and quiet. I saw a crowd. I saw noise. I saw risk. And then I saw you, standing there like I was the one in the wrong, like I had no authority. And I snapped, because deep down, I wasn't seeing you. I was seeing everything I've been trained to fear. Who trained you to fear? The pastor asked. Stone hesitated. My dad, he said. My neighborhood growing up, the academy, the streets. 100 small messages over 20 years that said, when they gather, be ready. When they talk back, take control. When they question you, shut it down. And what did you learn about listening? Nothing, he admitted. Only how to talk louder. The pastor nodded slowly. That's the first honest thing I've heard you say since this all began. Stone looked up, his voice tight. I'm not proud of it. I've been going over every stop I've made, every face I didn't see, every time I led with suspicion, not care. I used to think I was just doing my job. Now I don't even know what that means. You're not alone, Wright said. A lot of people in uniform are asking those same questions. The difference is whether or not you do something about it. I don't know how, Stone admitted. I do. the pastor said, reaching into his bag. He slid a small notebook across the table. Inside were names, resources, a local therapist, a discussion group that met weekly, police officers, residents, activists, a retired sergeant who now ran training on emotional accountability. I've seen these people change lives, the pastor said. I believe they can help you change yours. Stone stared at the page, blinking. Why are you doing this? He asked. After everything? The pastor leaned forward, steady. Because I've seen what happens when we give up on people. When we write them off as lost. We build more prisons. We bury more sons. We divide a country already cracked down. The middle. He paused. And because I saw something in your eyes, right after it happened, you weren't proud. You weren't angry. You were scared. Not of me, but of what you'd become. Stone swallowed hard. That scares me too. The pastor nodded. Again. Then that means there's still something in you worth saving. They sat in silence again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was hopeful. Finally, the pastor said, We're holding a community forum next week. Not about you. About all of this. You don't have to speak. But maybe, just come. Listen. Sit in the same room as the people who've been on the other side of your badge. Stone hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Then just be present, Wright said. No one's asking you to be perfect. Just human. Stone nodded slowly. Okay. As they stood to leave, the pastor extended his hand. Stone took it. No cameras, no speeches. Just two men, one trying to forgive, the other trying to change. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, and the street felt just a little lighter. As Stone walked back to his car, he looked at the notebook again. This wasn't the end of his career. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something better, something honest, something real. The day after his conversation with Pastor Wright, Officer Stone didn't sleep. Didn't turn on the news, and didn't check social media. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the small notebook the pastor had handed him. A few names, a few numbers, and a whole lot of unknowns. He had two choices. He could let that conversation be a nice memory, a quiet moment of peace in the middle of the storm, or he could actually try to change. He picked up the phone. His first call was to the therapist, the one listed near the top. A soft voice answered, and after a few seconds, Stone found himself saying words he never thought he would. Hi. My name is Riley. I'm a police officer, and I think I need to talk to someone about some things I've carried too long. The woman didn't interrupt. She simply offered him a time. His second call was harder. He dialed the number for the community discussion group listed in the back of the notebook. A man answered, friendly but cautious. When Stone introduced himself, the man's tone shifted. Not rude, just reserved. You sure you want to be here? He asked. No, Stone admitted. But I think I need to be. The man paused, then gave him the details. We meet Thursday nights. Don't come to talk. Come to listen. Stone wrote it down. His hands were shaking. That Thursday, he walked into the community center again. But this time, there were more people. No uniforms. No security. Just folding chairs in a circle, a pitcher of water on a plastic table, and about 24 people talking in soft voices. As he stepped inside, the room went quiet for a moment. Some people stared. One or two looked away. He didn't speak. He didn't offer any big words. He just nodded to the group and sat down in the empty seat closest to the back. The first person who spoke was a middle-aged woman in a school bus jacket. She didn't talk about police. She talked about her son, how he used to stay up at night when he was little, afraid his dad wouldn't come home. Not because of war, not because of illness, but because of a traffic stop. Another man shared, A story about walking to school in 5th grade and being told by his mom to never put his hands in his pockets. Not because it was rude, but because someone might assume he had something to hide. Each story chipped away at the wall Riley had spent years building inside himself. And for the first time, he didn't try to defend or explain or fix. He just listened. At the end of the night, no one clapped. No one said anything profound. But a young man near the door offered him a nod as he left. A small gesture, but it meant the world. Weeks passed. Riley kept going. Therapy sessions became part of his routine. Quiet conversations with his wife got longer. His kids started sitting closer to him again. And one Friday afternoon, he got a call that felt different. It was Pastor Wright. "There's a youth event at the community center next weekend," he said. "Basketball, food, workshops. We could use a few extra hands." Riley hesitated. "I'm not sure the kids want to see me there." Wright chuckled gently. "That's not what I asked. I asked if you'd come help." So he did. He wore jeans and a t-shirt. No badge, no gun. Just a whistle around his neck and a clipboard in his hand. At first, the kids avoided him. They gave him side eyes, whispered. One even muttered, "That's him." But he kept helping. He refilled water coolers, picked up trash, kept score at the basketball games. Nothing flashy, just quiet service. At one point, a ball bounced off the court and landed near his feet. A teenager jogged over to get it, clearly unsure whether to speak. Riley picked up the ball and held it out. "Nice three-pointer earlier," he said. The boy looked surprised. "You watched?" "Of course," Riley smiled. "You've got a strong shot. Keep working on it." The boy took the ball, nodded, and smiled back. It was small, but it was real. The following week, Pastor Wright called again. "We're holding a small group session. Teens who want to talk about leadership, community work, things like that. I'd like you to sit in." Riley said yes before he could overthink it. That night, he sat on the edge of a circle while 6 teenagers talked about what they wanted for their neighborhood. More lights on the streets. After-school jobs, a music studio, safer parks. One of the boys, quiet but confident, finally looked over at Riley. "You used to patrol here, right?" "I did." "You ever think about what it felt like on this side? Like knowing you might get stopped just for walking home?" Riley nodded. "I didn't then. I do now." The boy kept his gaze locked. "You gonna do anything with that?" "Yes," Riley said. "I'm trying to now." The boy nodded, slow, thoughtful, then moved. They weren't easy on him, and he didn't expect them to be, but he showed up, week after week, not as a savior, not as a hero, just a man trying to earn back something he once took for granted. A few months passed. The youth center created a new mentorship program, pairing teens with adults who'd lived through some hard truths. Riley was invited to join. Not lead, just sit, listen, and help when asked. One of the first boys he was paired with looked up at him during their second session and asked, "You're the cop who hit the pastor, right?" Riley didn't flinch. "Yes, I am." The boy nodded. "And you still came here?" "I did," Riley said, "because I don't want that to be the end of my story." "Cool," the boy replied, grabbing a basketball. "Can you show me how to throw a chest pass?" And that's how it started. One small moment at a time. Riley still faced looks when he walked into some rooms. Some people still whispered. Not everyone forgave. And that was okay. Change wasn't about being welcomed back. It was about being willing to stand there anyway. Open, honest, and real. One night, at a community dinner, Pastor Wright stood up during closing remarks and looked toward the back of the room. "We talk a lot about second chances," he said. "But second chances aren't gifts. They're agreements. You show us you've changed, and we'll show you that grace still lives here." Riley didn't speak, but his eyes filled. quietly, because for the first time in years, he felt seen not for what he had done, but for what he was trying to become. Not a cop, not a mistake, just a man on the road to something better. A year had passed since that morning on the corner. The slap that had echoed down a quiet street now lived as a moment captured in time, painful, raw, but no longer the end of the story. Oak Grove was still the same in some ways. The streets still cracked in the same places. The corner store still sold the same coffee. Kids still played basketball, near the community center. But something underneath had shifted. It wasn't loud or flashy. It didn't make headlines anymore. But if you listened closely, if you walked slow enough, you could feel it. The heartbeat of a community learning how to trust again. And that trust wasn't rebuilt with speeches or slogans. It was rebuilt in moments, like the one where Riley Stone, former officer on leave, now mentor and listener, helped a group of teens paint a mural on the side of the youth center. It was their idea. A wall full of faces they respected, teachers, grandparents, coaches, and right in the center, Pastor Wright, drawn with a gentle smile and open hands. Riley never asked to be added. And the kids didn't offer. But he didn't mind. That mural wasn't about him. It was about what could be built when people chose healing over hate. At home, things had changed too. His wife no longer spoke with worry in her voice. She still watched the news with one hand on the remote, but now she looked at Riley differently. Not with fear, but with something closer to peace. Their kids? They'd stopped whispering about what Dad did and started asking questions like, "Can we go to the community center with you today?" And, "Can you tell Pastor Wright I said thank you?" Riley smiled every time they asked, because somewhere in all of this, he'd found his way back to being a father. Then came a day Riley hadn't expected. It started with a simple phone call. "Officer Stone?" the voice asked. It was the mayor's office. "We're holding a community roundtable event," she explained. "Leaders, educators, activists, officers, people who've helped build new conversations this past year. Pastor Wright recommended you." Riley froze. "Me?" "Yes," the voice said warmly. "He says your story matters." He hesitated. "I'm not the hero here," Riley said. "If anything, I was the reason this all started." "That's exactly why your voice is needed," he agreed, reluctantly. But as the day approached, old fears crept in. Would people think he was just trying to fix his image? Would they look at him and still see the man who struck a preacher? Or would they see who he was now? The event was held at the same community center where it all began. Dozens of chairs filled the room, some familiar faces, some new ones. And at the front sat Pastor Wright, still calm, still steady, still carrying the weight of 100 broken hearts with the grace of someone who never let bitterness rot his spirit. When it was Riley's turn to speak, he stood slowly. No badge, no uniform. Just a man holding a paper in his hand, though he didn't read from it. "I'm not here to make excuses," he began. The room fell silent. "I'm not here to be applauded or forgiven. I'm here because I needed to learn what justice looks like when it's shaped by truth, not power." He paused, his voice steady. "When I raised my hand a year ago, I thought I was defending order. But I wasn't. I was defending my fear. I was defending years of assumptions and training that taught me to control instead of understand." Some nodded. Some just watched. But then something happened I didn't expect. The man I hurt didn't try to destroy me. He offered me a mirror. He looked at Pastor Wright. And when I looked into it, I didn't like what I saw. But, for the first time, I saw it honestly. He folded the paper in half. "I'm still not where I want to be, but I know where I'll never go back to. That's my promise. Not just as a former officer, but as a father, a husband, a neighbor, a man who's trying to build something better with what's left." He stepped down. There was no applause. Just silence. And then a single person stood. It was a teenage boy. The same boy who once asked him, "Aren't you the cop who hit the pastor?" Now he said, "That's real, man. Respect." Then a few more people stood, one by one. Not because it was expected, but because they believed it. Weeks later, Riley and Pastor Wright stood side by side under a warm spring sky, watching kids run across a field behind the church. A picnic table had been set up. A grill was going. Laughter filled the air, the easy kind that only shows up when people feel safe. "Funny," Pastor Wright said, sipping his lemonade. "A year ago, I thought this corner might become another place people feared," Riley smiled. "Now it smells like barbecue." "Progress," the pastor chuckled. Riley grew quiet for a moment. "I used to think change would be dramatic. Big speeches, headlines, spotlight. But now..." He looked around at the kids chasing soccer balls, the parents laughing on picnic, blankets, the volunteers handing out food. "Now I think change looks like this." The pastor nodded, quiet, consistent, real. They stood together for a while, letting the sun warm their shoulders. There was no need to talk much. They had said what mattered already, with actions, not just words. A little girl ran by and shouted, "Hey, Pastor! Hey, Mr. Riley!" They both turned and waved. Riley smiled. He didn't need to be Officer Stone anymore, not today. Later that evening, as he walked home with his family, Riley looked down at his son, who held his hand tightly. "Daddy?" the boy asked. "You're not a cop now, right?" "No, buddy," he said softly. The boy thought for a moment. "That's okay. I like you better like this." Riley didn't respond right away, but inside he felt something settle, something peaceful. In the weeks that followed, the community center's mural was finished. And this time, someone quietly added a small detail in the corner, a pair of hands shaking in front of a cracked wall that was slowly being repaired, brick by brick. No faces, no labels, just the symbol of a bridge being rebuilt. The kind of bridge that takes time, the kind that gets walked one careful step at a time. And if you visit Oak Grove today, you'll still see the mural, still see the community, still see Pastor Wright walking those same streets. And if you're lucky, you might even catch a quiet man with a clipboard, watching from the basketball court sidelines, smiling gently, handing out water, and remembering what it means to serve. Not with force, but with heart. Because sometimes, the people who fall the hardest are the ones who rise with the most purpose. And when they do, they remind the rest of us that grace doesn't erase the past, but it can help us build a better future